Ives felt that his music should not just come easily in pretty consonant dissonances, but he was interested in rubbing the consonant music with dissonant music so that there was a feeling of jostling between all these threads that he had inside him.
That's pianist Donald Berman. This is Classical Gas, a podcast series produced by the Music Critics Association of North America. I'm Gail Wein. The 150th anniversary of Charles Ives' birth is October 20th, 2024. We're marking the occasion with a conversation with Donald Berman, pianist and president of the Charles Ives Society. Berman has recorded 4 albums of Ives' music, including the 2024 recording of the Concord Sonata. Don, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Gail.
Let's launch right in. Charles Ives was, in many ways, perhaps in every way, a groundbreaking and renegade composer. How does his music fit into the canon of Western classical music?
Ives was a well-trained organist and studied Bach. And when he was in college, he studied at the Department of Music at Yale with Horatio Parker, and he was well steeped in the music of his time, the music of César Franck and Brahms particularly. And I've set out to compose music that took those models and expanded on them with the music that surrounded him. Um, that music was the music from the hymns of his church and of his youth, um, of the patriotic songs, particularly from the Civil War, which we have to remember was really just a decade or two before he was born. Um, Marches, of course, were part of that. His father led local town bands, popular music, and then a real streak of New England kind of experimental music. I've felt that his music should not just come easily in pretty consonant dissonances, but he was interested in rubbing the consonant music with dissonant music so that there was a feeling of jostling between all these threads that he had inside him. And it was really just motivic material for him that he put into the his music, and he worked them like anyone would work motives. Some were in the foreground, some were in the background, and I think he was interested in the process of fragmenting them at the start and then having them come together in a more unified way at the end. And what I admire about his process, I think the most, and what resonates for me the most, is that Ives' music often remembers an event or a certain time in American history. There are pieces like from Hanover Square North that set out to remember a certain event from that day, which was the day that the Lusitania sunk. One of the pieces I play um, and is on that recent CD is called St. Gaudens, and it is a memorial and a remembrance of Colonel Shaw and his 54th Regiment, which was the first New England army of black soldiers who died in South Carolina. His music sets out to recall that event. It doesn't just do it in a singular way, but it works like we work when we try to remember something. Um, there's a little glimmers of an image, a snapshot, a tune. You sort of recognize it. You're not sure where it's coming from. And he keeps pursuing that. And more of the picture comes into focus. And it's an overwhelming experience. And his ability to capture that is unlike to me stands separate from any composer I can think of. Ives famously left the field professionally and worked as an insurance salesman, or he was more than a salesman. He actually created the idea of mm, selling life insurance and
Right.
training
He was
agents to do it.
my personal fascination with him as a former actuary, and he was
Yeah, yeah,
a leader in the field of of that end of actuarial science.
yeah. It was very innovative what he did. His book of his, The Amount to Carry, is still cited by people in the field. And because he did that, he freed himself up to compose when he wanted and what he wanted, and without having to appeal to the tastes of presenters, critics, and audiences of his time, who he felt would not be receptive to what he was doing. And he proved that to himself by trying to do a big premiere of a more standard piece when he was very young. It wasn't received that well. And so he went underground and decided that he would become his own composer who was, as I love how he put it, not over influenced by the teachers of music around him. And he had his followers who became very important in 20th century music. Um, Lou Harrison, Henry Cowell, Bernard Herrmann,
And he helped
Sloninsky.
some of them financially in their careers.
Yes,
Some of these.
Ives made a lot of money, and he funded a lot of the League ISCM concerts, 7 years of the Pan American concerts. So these concerts featured music by all kinds of composers, not just Ives, from Cuba to Latin America to some American composers. Um, and he helped fund the New Music Quarterly. I think that was it, or Perspectives in New Music, one of the journals that started. And he really helped many young composers, and they were indebted to him because he really represented something interesting and new. Um, a lot of them went on to help edit and publish his music.
It's all about the fact, he had a day job. So, how good could he be might be the assumption.
Hmm.
But he was a real workaholic, from what I understand.
Well, he worked extremely hard from late 1800s through just around after World War One, and then he had a massive heart attack, and he slowed down quite a bit, but he spent quite a lot of time when he retired, when he was in his 50s, um, kind of consolidating his manuscripts, revising things. It
Yeah.
just so happened his vision was really quite avant-garde for its time. It's not easy to be an avant-garde artist in America. It's not easy now, and it wasn't easy 100 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, that dovetails to one of my next questions, which is your experience with Ives and its music and what you've done with it. As a performer, you studied piano with John Kirkpatrick, who knew Ives, and he premiered the Concord Sonata, among other Ives works, back in the 30s, 1930s. Now, did you seek Kirkpatrick out because of your interest in Ives, or was it the other way around? Did your passion develop because of your
Yeah,
studies
it
with?
was completely the other way around. So I was a student. My teacher at Wesleyan, George Barth, left. So I had no teacher, and he introduced me to Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick had retired, and he had had a stroke about 3 years before that time. He had stopped teaching. And I went to play for him, really not knowing a damn thing about him. And I played for him for hours. He just kept asking for more and more things. And then I started seeing him once a week for 3 years. I was his only student, and it was an all-day affair. And we studied, Bach and Mozart and the composers he became acquainted with in Paris in the 20s, Fauré, Stravinsky. Um, and it was only really in the third year that I sort of came across editions that he was just publishing of shorter pieces of Ives studies. And I learned this study number 20, and I really loved it because it um, appealed to my sense of polyrhythms. I was studying South Indian music at the time. And I just really, I, I had given up the idea of playing popular music, but I certainly grew up listening to popular music and prog rock and things like that. And I hadn't found a composer, maybe Hinastera, but someone who music felt really rhythmic and vital and fun. And I loved the challenge of putting these polyrhythms and things together. And so it was a very slow process of learning one short piece after another. Um, and really wasn't until I went to grad school at New England Conservatory and I took a class with John Heiss, who taught a famous class called Ives Schoenberg Stravinsky at NEC. And that's when I really learned who Ives was and got really excited about this idea of, not being over influenced and finding your own independent voice.
Yeah, and with that, I was very struck by the two volumes of solo piano music you recorded a while back, the Unknown Ives, Volume One and
Yeah, the two
Two.
CDs, right?
Yeah,
Just to
yeah,
distinguish, I published 3 volumes of the shorter works, but I made 2 CDs of almost all of it except for one piece.
right.
Yeah, so one piece at a time. Many of them I premiered, um, all of them I edited, um, or oversaw the editing of, and it took 30 years to get them published in compendiums. I'm really proud of
Yeah,
that work, and I wrote the prefaces and uh, became very involved with the Ives Society. And I did that so that I could get this music published and known and heard. Um, and I did this all before learning any of the big pieces like the Concord Sonata, which I only um, actively started working on much more recently.
mm,
And I did that because I wanted to know all the little sketches and studies and um, little fragments of pieces that he was using as a way to create up this very large work.
right. That
Um,
kind of reminds me of you go to an art museum exhibit and you see the sketches
yeah, exactly.
before you see the big oil painting of
Yeah, exactly.
whatever it is, and you
Yeah,
really can see the
yeah.
process.
It's very much akin to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So
That's what I was thinking of at the time as well.
yeah, so that got you involved with the Ives Society, and you are currently the president and treasurer of the Ives Society. Um, th- Tell me a bit about the Ives Society.
Hmm.
What's its mission and what's your role with that?
Sure. It was Vivian Perlis who got me involved with the Ives Society. Wonderful writer and innovative historian who did oral histories of composers. Um, anyway, the mission of the Ives Society is to primarily publish critical editions of his music. Um, some of it hasn't been published. Much of it was published, but in editions that have many mistakes. And the idea was to do scholarly editions. So when Ives died, his wife left um, some money to create the society, and we work very closely with the American Academy of Arts and Letters, who get royalties for performances of Ives' music. And we work very closely with the 3 publishers that Ives designated for putting out his music. Um, and then secondly, we have a component where we do outreach. And this particularly was inspired by Michael Tilson Thomas, who's our music director emeritus, and particularly in a meeting we had during COVID, like so many organizations, we wanted to do some online um, education. We wanted to reach a wider audience than just musicologists and people and professionals who are steeped in Ives. And through that, we created a much bigger website that has some media, videos, and learning tools, learning resources, and you can go very deeply into that. We have a searchable bibliography. We have a searchable discography. There's massive amounts of information you can get from them.
Don, thank you so much
Sure.
for your time and for all this great
Thanks,
information.
Gail.
The pianist Donald Berman, president of the Charles Ives Society. October 20th, 2024 would be Ives' 150th birthday. This is Classical Gas. I'm Gail Wein, producer and host of this podcast series. Thanks for listening.